Hey guys, welcome to another overclocking tutorial. Today we're taking a look on how to overclock a non-case CPU on a Gigabyte mainboard. In detail, the Z170-HD3P motherboard. And I want to start with a quick benchmark. You can see I did a Cinebench R15 benchmark with an Intel Pentium G4500T, which you can see here. And you can also see the multi-threaded performance is 243 Cinebench points and the single-threaded is 126 Cinebench points. Now I overclocked the system by 43% to almost 4.3 GHz, which is 24/7 stable. And now you can see that the multi-threaded performance increased to 355 Cinebench points and the single-threaded performance to 183 Cinebench points. Yeah, and if you compare those two screens, you can also see that the single-threaded performance increased by 45% and the multi-threaded performance by 46%. Yeah, so now I will show you how to do this, and of course you can use this tutorial for all other non-case CPUs, for example an i3-6100 or an i5-6400. Okay, first of all, get the correct BIOS for your motherboard. I put a link in the description where you can find all the available non-K BIOS for Gigabyte and also other mainboards. Make sure you get the correct file first, put it on a USB thumb drive and make sure that the USB thumb drive is FAT32 formatted, and afterwards just follow my instructions. Click on QFlash on top right and click on Update BIOS from Drive and select your USB disk. Afterwards, scroll down so you can select the correct BIOS version and simply press Enter. Now the BIOS will be updated. Okay, so after flashing the BIOS, you should see version F5G here, which we will need for overclocking the non-case CPU. And in detail, if you go to MIT current status, you can see the details of your system, and you can also see I'm using the Pentium G4500T CPU, which has a stock clock of 3 GHz. And in this tutorial, we will overclock the CPU to 4.3 GHz, which is a clock increasement of 43%. And of course, you can use the tutorial for all other non-case CPUs, for example, an i3-6100 or also an i5-6400. It will just work the same. You only have to adjust the BCIK to the right value. So first of all, go to Advanced Frequency Settings. Scroll down to Advanced CPU Core Settings and adjust the CPU clock ratio to 30. You can see that the maximum multiplier for this CPU is 30, which is shown on the left, and just make sure that you apply the same on the right. Also adjust the uncore ratio to 30. Now go back to the CPU base clock. The CPU base clock will affect the CPU core and also the memory frequency. You can see when I type 143 MHz in here, the resulting CPU frequency will change to what we want to have. So the resulting CPU frequency will be around 4.3 GHz, which is exactly what we want. You can also see that the memory frequency is kind of high. So the last thing we really have to do is to adjust the memory to the right frequency. To do this, load the XMP profile. If you don't have an XMP profile, that's no problem. Then you just skip the step here above and just adjust the system memory multiplier. Use plus and minus on your keyboard to adjust this value. And in my case, I need 18.66 because you always have to stay between, let's say, 2500 to maximum 2700 on non-case CPUs. Of course, if you have only 2100 memory frequency, the stock value I mean, then you have to use a lower multiplier, maybe 13.33 or 16. Just change it to the value you need suiting your memory. If you have trouble or if you have questions about this, just let me know in the comments. Now go to Advanced Voltage Settings and Advanced Power Settings and change the CPU vCore load line calibration to high. This will make sure that the CPU voltage will stay stable even on load so it doesn't drop down. Go back and go to CPU Core Voltage Control and change the CPU vCore to 1.35. 1.325. This value should be fine on all non-K CPUs, but make sure that you have a decent cooling unit. The problem with the non-K BIOS is that you cannot read out the core temperature in Windows. The only value you have is that we just go back to the main menu. The only value you have is the one here. So for example, if you should see 70 degrees here, it would be way too much. Yeah, the problem is with the non-K BIOS that some parts of the power managements are gone, so we cannot read out the voltage, the core temperature on load. Alright, so the last thing we could do is save this one in a profile. To do this, just go to the total right and go to save profile. Maybe profile 5 and just call it 5.3 gigahertz Pentium or whatever. And hit F10 and go to Windows, and then we will take a look on the stability and the settings of the system. Alright, so we just entered Windows, and now you basically need two tools. You need CPU-Z to check all the system details, and you also need Prime95 for stability testing. Yeah, first of all, let's take a look on CPU-Z. This will give you all the system information. You can see the Intel Pentium, which runs at roughly the 1.325, which we set in the BIOS. And you can also see the almost 4.3 GHz with a BCIK of 143 MHz. Also, if you go to Mainboard, you can see the HD3P mainboard with a F5G BIOS. And with memory, you can see that the memory is running at the 2666 MHz, which we set in the BIOS. You can only see half here because of DDR, which means double data rate. And you can also see the cache or uncore is also running at the same speed like the core frequency. Yeah, one thing I said earlier, you cannot check the core temperature with core temp. If you open the tool, you will always see 100 degrees Celsius on load. This is obviously a false readout, so yeah, don't care about any temperature readings with software. So let's open Prime95 and check the stability testing. Basically just check custom, enter 1344 here and 1344 on the right. Also check run FFTs in place and give it a go. You can now see that depending on how many cores you have, it will run one worker per thread. So in this case, only two workers because it's only a two-threaded CPU. Yeah, so keep this test running for about 1 hour. If it runs stable, it should be a good indicator to see that your system is pretty much stable, and then you can just play some games. If you have any trouble here, maybe a worker is stopping or you get some errors, it might be that you have to increase the core voltage a little bit, maybe to 1.35, but actually this setting should work on almost all CPUs. Yeah, so if you have any trouble, problems, questions, just let me know in the comments. I will try my best to help you out. See you guys.